Wow, this is awesome. A lot of familiar faces and new faces here. I've been trying to think about hidden and what that means to me. And I started to think about the hidden talents that all of us possess, that all of us have, that we all uncover in our friends, that we uncover in ourselves. And part of just being here and being part of NPR for the past frightfully 25 years is all about, for me, that process of finding out what was hidden inside myself. And so I thought I'd tell some of that story. And then the other part of it, of course, is giving back, which is finding hidden talents in the musicians that we invite here to play at NPR, and the umpteen submissions that we get every day, and trying to find all those talents. I grew up in New York and moved here as a teenager. My life living in New York and music, let me see if I can find it, was basically listening to music on this very exact model of a transistor radio, and I'd walk down the streets doing this instead of this. Right? Not that much different, really. Life hasn't changed all that much in all the years. There were 2 radio stations to listen to in New York. They were worth it. And you just sort of dial between the 2 all day long, walk around and change the battery now and again. So always a music fanatic. Everything I did was my homework, my whatever, would always have music as my background. It felt normal and right. And it didn't really change when I moved to, my family moved to Maryland. I was a teenager and had 0 friends. I was the hippie kid with the long hair in a world that, back in those days, the distances of place and style and time there was lag. Now everything does this. When somebody knows something, everybody knows it. Back then, styles here were very different than they were in New York. So I was kind of an outsider. Spent lots of my time in my room listening to music, I have to say, which suited me just fine. I think we all try to figure out what we want to do with our lives. I thought it was all about just going to school, finding out what you want to do, going to school, and then you do it. How many people did that ever happen to? Does that happen to anybody in this room? Well, anyway, I thought that's the way it worked. And so I was a psych major in college. And I worked at record stores, of course. 6 days a week, 48 hours a week, $1.75 an hour. And I paid for my college through that. My parents hadn't saved up money, so I would work 48 hours a week and go to school full time and pay for school that way. And it seemed pretty cool. I worked roughly 1 to 9 at night and went to school 8 to 11, 8 to 12. And it was pretty great. I was in the record business at a time where amazing music was coming out. This is the 70s. I'm that old. And I loved working in record stores and figured, as the psychology thing didn't pan out so well, I thought I'd get into the record business somehow, and turned into a business major, which I still, to this day, puzzle over, figuring I'd work somewhere in the record business. And I went to school for community college here, University of Maryland here. And then one day I got a phone call, and one of the folks at this record chain I worked at said they have a job opening to be a manager for one of the stores. And it was the same day I was struggling to register for my 5th year of college, trying to figure out still what I was going to do, and signing up for that math statistics class that, what was it? It was some kind of, it was a business statistics class. And there was just, manage a record store, statistics course. And I dropped out of college and started running record stores, eventually being a buyer. And a buyer is a guy who decides what records a store is going to carry and the chain of stores are going to carry and stuff. And I did mostly the obscure import stuff back then. And that was humming along pretty well. I liked it. I liked dealing with people every day. I liked organizing and managing and stuff. But it still wasn't me. And I thought, where am I going to go with this business stuff and records? And everybody who was in business, who was making money, real money in record business, were all sorts of, they were salesmen, basically. Promotion people are salesmen. And I didn't want to do that. It didn't feel right. There was, and not to discredit all of the people in that business, but basically, whether you like it or not, you're going to push stuff that you don't care about. That's your job. That's what you get paid for, and I couldn't do that. And this is the beginning of the punk movement in the 70s. And one day I just decided to quit it all. And I sold my car. I bought an ARP Odyssey, which is a synthesizer. And within a couple of weeks, found somebody who wanted to form a band. And I started a band called Tiny Desk Unit in the late 70s, which is yes. This is our second record. The first record was a live record from the 930 Club. We were the first band ever to play the 930 Club in 1980, May of 1980. And our first record was the live record because we tried to make a record in a studio. We were sort of a psychedelic dance band. I wish I had some pictures here. There probably are some somewhere on this wall. But we were sort of a psychedelic dance band that didn't take well to being in the studio. We meandered a lot in our performances, live performances, and we liked that, and that's sort of what we were all about. But we did go into the studio, and this is part of the hidden thing that I want to talk about, which is there's a fellow there who ran this studio called No Evil Studios, and his name was Nick Koumoutsias. And I'd give him a big hug if he were here right now. And I don't know, I met Nick, and one day Nick said to me, here, and he dangled a set of keys in front of me. And he said, these are the keys to my studio. And you can come in here any night when nobody's here. I'm not going to teach you how to use it. You have to figure that out. And I went, whoa, it's a beautiful 24-track studio. And so that's what I would do. I would go in when everybody was asleep, and I'd go in the studio, and I'd learn how to do recording. I don't know what it is about people who see things in other people that they don't see in themselves, but we should all do that. I think it's one of the most important things we can do to one another as fellow humans. For whatever it was that Nick saw in me, the ability to do that, I had no idea. I'd never touched a recording button before. I'd never placed a microphone. I'd never, any of that. And all I was some synth player in one of the umpteen bands that would walk into that room. Eventually we formed a label together. That record came out on that label. And eventually, like all bands, our band self-destructed. People are young and they do stupid things. Not long after Tiny Desk Unit broke up, a fellow came along and he had booked our band in Baltimore. And he said, I'm starting a theater company called Impossible Theater, and we call ourselves Impossible Theater for good reasons. We're a multimedia company with, we write our own stuff. It's 15 slide projectors with thousands of images on multi-layered screens, and this is September, and he said, we're opening our very first piece in November. Would you like to write music for our theater company? Now, I'd never written a lick of music in my life. I played with Tiny Desk Unit, but that was somebody starts playing and I find the right sound that fits. That's not like writing a song. It's not like writing a melody. It's not like, and we're thinking, this guy wants me to compose 25, 30 pieces of music in September for a piece that opens in November, and I've never written a song in my life. And again, it's that same thing. What was it that made him think that I could possibly do that? I certainly didn't think I could do it, but I instantly said yes. And I took on the challenge. And we'd sit around a table for 10, 12, 15 hours a day and talk about scenes and write scripts. And then I'd go back to that studio where I had those keys. And time goes fast. We supposed to stop at what time? Anyway, I'll just keep going. And I did. I wrote this music, that some of the best music I've ever made in no time at all, it seemed. I'd go to the studio at night with the ideas that people had given to me, and I'd bring back tapes the next day, and we presented this amazing piece called City of Strangers in Baltimore in the early 80s. Went on to, as a theater company, to play the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and wound up playing, doing a residency at Banff up in Canada, and doing amazing, amazing stuff. One of the things that we did, which got me here, was in 1983, was the beginning of sampling, sort of. I mean, it started a little sooner, but the essence of sampling and machinery that can make music like that was around that time. And there's a music festival coming to Washington called New Music America. And New Music America was, well, it just basically brought interesting artists together. And I decided to do 3 projects that week. I did a film score on the wall of the National Theater outside for a film called Metropolis with my friend Robin Rose. And we just played live to the movie and projected it on the screen. I formed a jazz band with a couple of friends, some of who I knew, some of who I didn't know. But the main thing I did was I made a proposal to the Smithsonian with the theater company I was working in. We were working on a piece about the history of sound. And we decided to do a piece, Impossible Theater, on the history of sound that imagined, a small project that imagined the history of sound from the beginning of time to the end of time as a visual installation, sound and visual installation at the Smithsonian. And I went up to this company called New England Digital. It was making a synth at the time that did sampling. And I said, I want to do this piece. And I told them all about it. And and nobody had bought into it yet. The Smithsonian didn't know we were going to do it. But everybody eventually just said yes. And we did this piece, imagining the history of sound, beginning of time, end of time, in 20 minutes. And NPR heard this piece. And NPR did a story on this piece. And that was 1983, and I was on the radio. I remember they asked me, this guy calls me up. This guy happens to be Ira Glass, which we all know. but at the time, Ira was like a 23-year-old kid working at All Things Considered, doing production. And he calls me up and said, so we love your piece. We want to do something. And I said, I can't do that. I said, I've been up. I mean, literally, when I got this instrument, I had to learn how to use it. It's like this little deck green screen computer, and I had to find all these samples, and I'd go to National Geographic and get underwater volcano sounds, and I was trying to make this thing and sync these, 3 slide projectors to make this. Oh, it's just insane. And I would sit in front of the computer like this for like hours and hours and hours. And as it turned out, at the end, I could barely move my mouth because I had done held my jaw for so long. And so when they asked me to be on my favorite radio show and All Things Considered, I said, I can't do that. I've slept 3 hours in 2 days. But I did, and I went on, and it went okay. Susan Stamberg is the most amazing, somebody to pull something out of you. She did. I guess I got to make long stories shorter and shorter here, but that was 1983. In 1988, I got married, and I said to my wife, I said, we have 2 cats and an efficiency apartment. I was working in TV, doing TV production. And I said, I'm going to quit that TV job. I'm going to find that guy who was Ira. I was going to find Ira, and I was going to say, remember me 5 years ago? You did a story on my music. I want to work at All Things Considered. I'd never had a day in radio, never a day in journalism, not a day in whatever. And I found him, and he said to me, do you cut tape? And I, at the time, real tapes with razor blades and grease pencils. I said, yeah. I had once in my lifetime put a piece of splicing tape on a reel. And he gave me an interview to cut, stuck me in a room in a booth with a tape machine and grease pencil. A 20-minute interview. And I cut it down to 4, and I gave it to him, and he said, come back Monday. And I had quit my job in TV. And I'd walk in every morning, and I would just like, hey guys, need any help? And it was, I mean, you can't do that here now. But you could then. There was no security. I mean, okay, there was a security person, but you could just say hi and you walk right by. I started working at All Things Considered, and this is the hidden thing. Why they hired me, I don't know. But again, they must have seen something in me. And somewhere along that line, they said, would you direct All Things Considered? And I don't know if you know what that means, but it's like being the orchestra conductor for a live orchestra while the piece is being composed and you are conducting a piece that somebody in the other room is scribbling down the score and they hand it to you. You're doing that in radio. You were doing that with hosts on the other end, reporters in the field, talking down lines and buttons that, to somebody in Italy to make sure they're ready, to make sure that they know, and you have the proper tape and you pick out the music. One of the things you do as directors of All Things Considered is you pick those little pieces of music out, and that's what I became very, very good at. And I think that was the talent that my friend, co-worker Marika Partridge saw in me, that I could do that thing. Because at first when they asked me to direct, I said, no, that's insane. I'm a space cadet, and you're going to ask me to run this news show? It's nuts. But I did, and thanks to somebody who saw something in me and had the hidden thing inside of me that I never knew I had, I was able to do that. And I directed All Things Considered for 19 years, doing a live news show. And it was the most awesome thing until this. I started All Songs Considered in 2000 as a multimedia online music show. It was just insane. It was, people had 14.4 baud modems back then, if anybody knows what that is, but basically connection was super, super slow. And the first show was an hour long, and it was a multimedia show mimicking what I did back in the days of theater, which was, it was slides, it was images of the musicians, their instruments, the scripts and text about who they were while I talked and while the music played, and an hour long. I remember getting an email from a farmer in Vermont to say that he skipped milking his cows that day. It was still one of my favorite letters ever. But it was just this magical, crazy thing that we did. Eventually, we scaled it down so we could do it weekly, and just did a music show. And I get so many submissions from musicians. I mean, these days now, there's probably 400 emails that come in every day, of which 300 are some sort of submission of a song or a video or a Tiny Desk offer. And the trick is to try to find whatever the talent is. I mean, and I always say that nobody's music is really bad, that it's really up to the listener. And so I don't think of myself as deciding good music and bad music. I just decide that the best thing I can do is decide what works for me and what I can put my passion behind and let somebody else. The wonderful thing is now, instead of, like these days, when you had this, you had 2 gatekeepers. In New York, it was WABC and WMCA. Eventually, FM radio came along, and it was WNEW, but really 3 gatekeepers. And now we have a gazillion gatekeepers, and that is just a powerful and wonderful thing, because it means that there are many ears and many different experiences that will bring things to the table that will make it possible for all sorts of music to get out there. We now have a working class of musicians who could go around the country and tour because there are umpteen clubs now, and you're able to make a living just going on the road and selling your merch and playing your music, which is kind of cool. And so I'll sort of come to a wrap, and maybe we can ask some questions. But I think the important thing and what I try to do here is give back and try to find what is hidden in people who are often 18, 20, 25 years old with dreams, who, put their, when I used to get CDs, I used to just think about like this thing, especially in 2001 and 2 and 3 and 4. I'm just holding up a random CD, but this thing is somebody's life. It's like somebody has taken their grandmother's, when they passed away, the money that they left, or they've sold something, like I sold my car to buy my sins. Somebody has, done something, major sacrifice to make these things. These are not casual. It is, and then someone has to decide to do something with it or not. And I always, as it's not an incredible burden, but I always try to make a point to, in some way, shape, or form, to know that everything that comes this way is somebody's dream, and that we need to treat them as best we can. You can't treat everything equally, and you can't be completely fair, and you are going to miss great things, and you are going to do great things, and all those things are going to happen. But it's really important that in all of our lives and what we do, that we treat each other fairly and give each other a chance and see the hidden talent in the person you work with, and your mother and father and your kids, and it's the best we can do in the short lives we have. So go forward, find the hidden. Thank you.